Hello and welcome to the Monster Mechanics Podcast, where we take creatures of myth and media and see how they can be improved. I am your host, Scott Paladin, and with me as always is the Peter Perfect to my Dick Dastardly, Zach Jaquays. What are we talking about today, Zach?
Today we are talking about werewolves. So probably the most classical version of a werewolf is in the form of a curse. A man is infected with this curse often by being bitten or scratched by another werewolf. And they are forced to turn into a wolf during the full moon, forget their humanity, and hunt under the night sky.
Yeah, that's probably the one that in our culture will be the most common through line of werewolves. Although this is such a pernicious idea that it shows up all over the place in Western culture. Seemingly any place that there is wolves, there's somebody turning into a wolf in legend. The actual word werewolf, by the way, for fun etymology fact, comes from the old German. The word for wer, W-E-R, is how it's currently stylized, is just a synonym for man. So it literally is just man-wolf, like it's wolfman.
Okay.
And which also means, as a fun fact, that a female werewolf could actually be a whiff-wolf, which I think is so much fun to say. But I think there's something about like the wolf itself. It was a dangerous predator for so long in our history that like it rides high in the mental consciousness, especially of Westerners, of like what the importance of a werewolf is, or I'm sorry, the importance of wolves. But they are also, you can imagine seeing the similarities as somebody who, if you live around a campfire and the wolves come out at night, like, well, we have our tribe, they have their tribe. Humans and wolves actually hunt in a very similar manner. We're both endurance hunters. And then with the development of the domestication of dogs, like we get along well, it turns out, with wolves. And so you can sort of, there's this natural like bridge, I think, between the idea of man and wolf. Like if we're looking for the analog for a man within the world, people love the metaphor of the wolf, the lone wolf, and
I mean, I feel like wolves are like the original monster.
Yes, absolutely. And lycanthropy specifically, and werewolfism, people turning into wolves, is super common. Like, whereas as compared to things like bears show up occasionally with some legends, specifically like in Norse legends with the berserkers and stuff. But and I think there's probably some of that in a few Native American myths as well. But that's me talking outside my expertise. But like, so many different cultures bring up, at least Western cultures bring up werewolfism as a thing. They're in classical antiquity. Like there are numerous different Greek and Roman legends where men are turned into wolves either by the gods or by magic. And there are, as the legend has spread, like the sort of modern version of werewolf seems to have come from like Central Europe, explaining the Germanic origin of the word. Since then, media and myth and legend and superstition has like thrown out so many different kinds of werewolves. Like the idea of a werewolf as a disease is one thing. There's also werewolfism as a kind of witchcraft where you go grab the pelts of an animal and like put it on and turn into that animal is super common.
There's also versions that are a species.
Yep. Where it's like it's a
bloodline or something.
Yep, exactly. So we could go any different direction with werewolves. I'm going to give a special shout out to the Shetland Islands, which have the Wolver, W-L-V-E-R, which I think is the most adorable werewolf. They're not dangerous and they don't turn into humans. They're just like a furry dude. Like literally, like look up furries art, and that's what they're supposed to look like. Like a man's body with a wolf head that's covered in fur. And they're not dangerous. Like if you don't f with them, they don't f with you. They don't go hunting people at night. They just fish. They're like really good fishermen. And sometimes when people are hungry, they leave fish on their windowsills, which is so cute. So A+ for the Wolver, although I don't think we're going to be expanding on that idea a whole lot because it's so perfect. Because I am full of werewolf facts, I'm also going to briefly mention ergotism.
Okay.
Central Europe, instead of growing wheat, lots of them grow rye. There's a particular kind of fungus called ergot, which can grow on the rye grains themselves, and it is a poison. It creates a lot of health problems for you if you eat it. One of those, though, is like it has a psychoactive component, and then it also tends to cause like cramping in the extremities, like your feet and your hands, which makes people have sort of a paw-like stance to their hands, like they'll kind of clench up in like a paw. And then so there's one theory that this is the origin of the modern werewolf ideas, that people were eating this spoiled grain back in the day, and then quote unquote turning into werewolves by like going a bit crazy, going out of control, and then taking on some sort of animalistic qualities. I'm not entirely sure I believe that as a unified werewolf theory of like this is the seed from which everything came out, because like I said, this is much older than that. Like the idea of men turning into wolves is predates this idea by millennia, really. But it is a neat aside. And I totally pitched, although you didn't seem to go for the idea of us making mushroom werewolves. So
yeah, I feel like we've done a lot of infection-based
that's totally fine.
creatures, like with our aliens episode, and I feel like we've touched on that a little bit. So I hesitate to retread ground.
It is a little bit ridiculous. I think maybe before we go into like big thematic ideas, let's just talk a little bit about the weirdness of the biology of turning into another animal. Like it has been questioned before. I'm not the first one to bring this up, but like if you turn into a wolf, okay, that makes sense. All of the hair, for example, grows out of your skin. But like when you turn into a man from a wolf, does it go back in or does it fall out? Either of those are kind of weird and worth thinking about.
Yeah, I feel like you'd have to shed, because
it retracting.
The alternative is too horrible to think about.
Imagine the noise, man.
We'll cut that.
Okay. And like, I'm trying to think about good transformation sequences. There's the very famous American Werewolf in London transformation sequence, which was almost all practical effects, which are beautiful, and was one of the first cinematic times to like show the excruciating body horror of the transformation of a man to wolf. Highly recommend that. There is also, I'm going to get this wrong. There's a movie where it's actually like 3 separate segments about werewolves, one of which has like a Red Riding Hood as the story behind it. And I remember the special effect they used, the thesis of the special effect they used was that there is a wolf underneath your skin. And so it's literally people peeling their faces off and having a wolf face underneath. Yeah. That is fucking fantastic. That is a horror show that will haunt you for the rest of your days. Highly recommend.
And for the more PG-13 ones, they tend to go with like the hair growing out, you know, you can see the bone structure moving underneath. Yeah. But they don't do the full skin tearing and
not so much on
wolf
that one.
Bursting out.
Yeah. And then you can go full on G-rated where it's just kind of like, it just sort of happens off panel and we don't think about it too much. Like,
yeah.
It's interesting also that the sort of in-between form, other with the exception of the Wolver, the in-between form of like half man, half wolf doesn't seem to be a super big, it doesn't seem to be a prominent element of werewolf lore until the modern age. That it really was very much a man to wolf, like 100% sort of transition. And the idea of being stuck in between is much more modern.
Yeah, I feel like that was probably an issue with something that got lost in translation.
Yes.
The legend of the werewolf was being spread, and they're like, so it's a man wolf?
Yes.
Like half man, half wolf? And that's where that came about.
Yeah. Yeah, I like we're all in on body horror on this podcast. So I love the gruesome extended transformation that happens in between man and wolf. That also makes it a high cost to transform back and forth if you're doing a voluntary transformation. Like if the process itself takes a long time and causes you a lot of discomfort, then you're not going to be switching back and forth, you know, like, oh, well, it's faster to run to the store as a wolf, so I'll just turn into a wolf, head over to the store, and then turn back in. Like that makes it this is more like a commitment to turn into one. That's kind of cool. There's also sort of the idea of, I forget what author I'm thinking of, is the idea of like the two physical forms are separate from one another and that they're just replacing each other in space is kind of cool. That like you sort of have a space where there is a wolf body just sort of hanging out that you just sort of slip into, and that one kind of takes over without actually physically transforming from one to the other. That gets you around some more ideas, like if you are injured in one form, do you get injured in another? That would sort of answer that question by saying they're completely separate from one another. I don't know how Animorphs takes care of it. I think they actually do physically change, but they're kind of an outgrowth of that as well.
Yeah.
Let's see. Oh, Here's a fun, again, I'm full of werewolf facts. One of the old school ways to turn back a werewolf was to throw their clothes at them and then yell at them. You take somebody who loves them was supposed to go into the woods with their clothes, hurl them at them, and then be like, "You come home, Jimmy." Fantastic.
Yeah. Forget silver bullets.
Yep.
Just throw their pants at them.
Silver bullets for werewolves is actually a modern invention as well. It comes from the movie eras. Yeah. Before that, silver versus werewolves doesn't seem to have been a thing. Silver was more.
Did they have like the special immunities that you tend to see? Like so much in films, we see like their bullets don't seem to affect them unless they're silver.
Yeah, no, that seems to be modern. It seems, at least as far as my research goes. Of course, the extension of werewolf literature is huge, so there's probably counterexamples for anything I'm going to say. But like when you were a wolf, you kind of just were a wolf. And there's lots of stories. One of the like common formats for the story is that like a hunter is out hunting in the woods and he sees a big animal and he shoots it either with an arrow or a gun, and then the human form of that person is seen later limping or clutching a wound, or has died from that thing and is turned back into a human post-mortem and stuff like that. So no, they seem to be perfectly vulnerable as a creature, except for that they are an animal. So they're strong and tough and fast and all those things. So they're more dangerous than a human, but they're not like supernaturally inclined in that way.
That makes sense. So do we have an angle of attack on where we want to go with?
Well, if we're
our werewolves,
yeah, I'm not super big on the idea of werewolves as like a species, as just like a thing that lives alongside humans. I mean, that's been done, and I don't have any problem with it. I just don't want to do it today, I think.
Yeah,
that seems like we'd have to me, that feels like you have to come up with this whole parallel society, and I think that at the heart of the werewolf idea is the man turning into a wolf, right? Is like just a regular person, or quote unquote regular person, like is a human, a true human who becomes a monster. So to me and if we're not doing something that's an infection or plague, then to me the answer is to go lean hard into werewolfism as like a thing that you do in order to gain power. Okay. That's a very common attribute where you, instead of being infected or having it take over you like a curse, you are like going through a ritual where you cover yourself in animal fat and then put a pelt on, or you make a deal with a demon in order to gain this power, because it is powerful.
I love the idea of there being like an animal spirit or demon spirit that you're making this bargain with.
Yeah. Maybe to placate the demon, to pay for your additional power, you have to serve it. Like that's why you have to hunt humans or something like that, is because you are doing its bidding during that time.
Or maybe maybe as part of the bargain, like 10% of the time, just those 3 days around the full moon, you are like, you no longer have control of your body. That's the demon's time.
Ooh, okay. That's hot.
So
I like that idea.
So that's why you have no recollection of those days when you were a wolf.
Okay, so maybe it's tied. Maybe the wolf isn't the power. Maybe the wolf is the cost, and so there's some other power that you're making a deal for.
Oh yeah, it could be anything from like a Faustian bargain, or maybe you have the option to become a wolf at any time. But there's that time where there's those 3 days where you are going to be a wolf, and it's not going to be you in the driver's seat.
Yeah. Is there a wolf adjacent power that isn't turning into a wolf that we could use? I mean, there's obviously things like having a really good sense of smell or something like that, but is there something sort of vaguely adjacent to that that would make sense for you to get from like a wolf god or a wolf demon?
I mean, there's things like cunning, strength, and savagery. Like you can see like warriors pledging to this demon spirit to defeat their enemies. Yeah. I mean, for increased savagery and prowess.
Yeah. And there is, you could also go less wolf specific and always be more generic, where it's like, okay, I'm just a woodcutter and I want money and I want power, I want fame in my community. And so you make the deal with the demon and it gives you those things, but in cost, turns you into this demon 3 days out of the month. That's cool too.
I also like the idea that maybe it doesn't even necessarily have to be a wolf, because there's plenty of other, I mean, more so recently than in Legend of other animals
Yeah.
being, you got werebears, wereboars,
Yeah.
weretigers, that kind of thing.
And there are other creatures that have legends. They just don't tend to be as widespread. So there's like the Selkie of Celtic myth. It's actually a seal that turns into a woman, usually a woman. It tends to marry a dude in the legends because I guess horny male authors go back as far as antiquity.
Of course.
But in fact, there's a whole category of fairy tale called like the animal bride or the animal husband, where like there's an Indian legend about a woman marrying a snake that turns into a man. There's the kitsune of Japanese myth, which are foxes that tend to turn into humans. So there's like there is this sort of oeuvre or running motif with humans and animals turning into each other. But the werewolf seems to be just, at least in Western cultures, very, very common. So there is other stuff there. So if we wanted to expand our particular idea out beyond wolves, that's totally available.
But yeah, I also like the idea that, like, I think the reason why, like, these wolves are so, or they're so predominantly wolves, is because of our, in ancient myth, when we were, again, huddled around those fires and whatnot, like, wolves were the scariest thing out there.
Yep.
And so a man who could become that wolf could harness that fear, that power, and be more.
So I like the idea that whatever power is being dealt with here, literally, like you're making a deal with some sort of god or demon or something like that, that you maybe could ask for a lot of different things from it. That like you could ask for the power to become a wolf, and that may be what it gives you, or it could be just that you want to ask for generic prosperity or anything like that, which gives it a widespreadness that is good. Like it gives you a ubiquity because anybody could want this power. Whereas literally the ability to turn into a wolf, if you actually ask people, I'm not sure there's that many people who would totally love that.
Yeah. I mean, there's not a whole lot of modern day applications for that.
Well, and even like medieval applications, if you're just a farmer, becoming a wolf is probably not super useful to you.
Yeah.
But that having your crops flourish is totally useful to you. And that's the kind of thing that you might make a deal with. So do we want to nail down what this entity is that we're dealing with? Is it a god? Is it a demon? Is it
maybe it's a forest spirit of some kind.
Oh, I like this. It is an old god. It's a pagan god.
Okay.
And that, at least in the structure of the sort of stories we might be telling, this is a post-Christianization area where the pagan gods have been pushed out by a new religion. And you are going to one of the forgotten gods, one of the old ones from the forest, that when you're going to make that deal. I like that.
Yeah, that's cool.
And that also that gives you a conflict right there. Like, what does this old god want? It wants recognition. It wants to exact revenge on the community that rejected it. And that's why when you turn into a wolf for that time, you go on a rampage, is because this thing has the god has a vendetta, Yeah. And then it also gives you the freedom for some characters to regard it as a demon, because that's the Christian framing of this whole thing, is that no, this isn't a god, this is a demon.
Okay, yeah.
So yeah, this is an old god. I'm not gonna say that we should use one in particular. We're just gonna sort of imagine this as sort of like one that is literally a forgotten god, one that doesn't survive the Christianization of its area, where all records of it were stamped out. That'd be cool. So the legend kind of passes through the community that like you could go down. Is the crossroads going down the crossroads? I can't remember if that got pulled from Africa when it was brought into the Americas, or if it came from Europe. I know that crossroads have a lot of mythological significance in various other in Western cultures, but I don't want to pull something non-European about like making the deal with the devil.
Yeah,
man. As an aside, I fucking love how weird the devil is in old art.
Oh yeah.
Look at this bullshit. I'm putting it in the chat.
Sure.
That devil has a face on his butt.
How'd he do?
And like Shrek ears almost, with hair coming out of him. And like his proportions are all wrong. I love it.
Yeah.
Okay, that aside over. So okay, we're not going to use the crossroads motif. I think we need something else. So I like the idea of going into the forest, like going into the old forest, like the untamed wilds is where you have to make this deal. And you obviously have a thing in mind that you want, and you meet with the old god, or maybe you you have to make a sacrifice. Maybe sacrifices are great for this kind of legend.
Yeah, I feel like, God, like something like where the like is implicitly involved with like the revenge of this old god, like the blood of a saint or something.
Ooh, yeah, or even just like a Christian symbol, like breaking a cross, a crucifix, or or like burning a Bible or something like that. Like you have to commit an act of sacrilege in order to get the attention of the old god, who will then appear for you. I like that a lot. Yeah, I don't think we need to be specific on that. I think it just needs to be destroying an object of the new religion's reverence would be totally good. And then you make the deal where you just say, hey, I want, I don't know, I want my crops to flourish, or I want everyone in the town to love me, or I want to marry the blacksmith's daughter or something like that. You make a good old school fairy tale ask of it. And the god is like, okay, the deal is for, however many days of the lunar cycle, you get everything you'll want, but I get you for the rest, for those days around the full moon.
Maybe the god is like lunar themed.
Yeah.
And like it's like for the 3 days that my eye is fully open.
Oh, I like that. That's a good line.
You are mine to do with as I please.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that. I love the idea of the phrase "the moon-eyed god" is great. Yeah, the moon-eyed god. I like that. And that, it's associated with wolves. And so you make the deal and it sends you back home. And, for the first, like, okay, so it has to be, this means you have to have made the deal on the full moon too. Like that first night, that's when it's at there, when the god's power is at height, when its eye is fully open, is you have to do it under the light of the full moon. And then it sends you back home and you have, 28 days or whatever, 26 days of, everything suddenly starts to go right for you. All of the things that you were asking for, your luck improves, your crops flourish, your maybe the eye of the blacksmith's daughter turns your way, all that stuff. And then on the night of the full moon, that's when the deal comes due and you have to change back. So are we talking, we've talked about the various options for the transformation. What do you think we want to go with? Full on body horror?
Yeah, I think like there's got to be like some serious regret in making this deal come time of the full moon.
Because the god already has your agreement, and he doesn't need you to he doesn't care if it hurts you or not.
Yeah.
He's going to just do it in whatever way pleases him most. So here's what I'm thinking. So the full moon is it's always going to be rising as the sun is setting, basically. Like those are going to be very coincident during that time, just because of the way that's what the full moon does. So it's as the moon rises, and like maybe there's maybe the time between when the sun first touches the horizon and the moon finally clears the horizon. That's how long it takes. So it's this long, very drawn out process.
Oh yeah.
That's going to be something
unspeakable agony as your bones reshape. You grow new bones.
Yep. And the tail rips out.
Claw your skin out.
Yeah. It's like you can imagine it starting as an itching, as that hair underneath the skin starts to grow out the fur, and drawing that out fully seems thematically appropriate for making a deal with an old god who's very angry and it doesn't particularly care. Like you've made a deal with it. You're not the favored of this god. You just made a deal with it. So he doesn't care. Yeah, that full on American Werewolf in London style, like reshaping, turning into a giant wolf. I think for the purposes of what we're talking about, I think giant wolf makes sense too. Like you're never going to turn into just wolves are big, by the way. If you don't know, if you have not experienced the wolf up close, think about how big you think a wolf is, and then double it. That's how big wolves are. Wolves are huge. But I think even on the scale of wolves, that you are a big, imposing individual, because that makes you that all the better for the god to extract his vengeance with. And I do also like the idea that the first transformation is not necessarily going to go straight into full-on complete rampage. That it does take successive cycles of the moon for you to go like it starts off with maybe just roaming through the hills, as the god sort of, for lack of a better word, acclimates to controlling you, right? Like it spends some time getting used to you, and then it escalates over time, where first it's attacking livestock, and then it's attacking lone villagers, and then it's attacking households, and then it kills the local priest, you know, and like it gets worse and worse as the cycle continues until finally the god will expect this, but at some point the community all comes out and at once to hunt you, you know. But during that time, you are a it gives you everything you wanted, and you are a weapon for this old god to use to attack the community that rejected them. That's cool.
Yeah.
This is also maybe that gives us some information about how these werewolf attacks would work. Is like this thing probably doesn't eat people necessarily. Like his goal is to kill and cause like damage. And so he's not eating out of hunger. So like the first attacks, like that we're talking about, I was talking about the attacks on livestock, isn't like a normal wolf attack where like part of the cow gets eaten or anything like that, or that a goat gets dragged off. It's like specifically killed and left there as a message for the town.
Okay. Yeah. So he's trying to like instill terror in this town.
Yes. Yeah. In fact, like leaving a gutted animal in the town square would be like his style. That sounds right to me. Ooh. Yeah. Especially if there was something associated with that god that he could call back to as well. Like,
okay. Yeah.
Gross out warning, listeners. There's the, I don't even know if it's fully historical or if it's apocryphal, but there's the concept of the blood eagle. Coming from the Norse mythology, not mythology, but actually historicity, where they would supposedly break your ribs and then pull the lungs out from the back and flap them up. They would look like wings. It's called the blood angel. So I'm not sure that we should use that whole cloth, but that something along those lines that like this is a calling card would be kind of cool to use.
Yeah.
So we know this is a god of the moon. We know this is a god of wolves and the wilds. Maybe it'd be something to do with trees, like leaving the corpses hanging from trees, like by their guts or something, or.
And we also got to remember this thing is in the shape of a wolf.
Yeah. Maybe it's just like spreading the pieces out a lot. Like maybe there used to be a ritual where like as a sign of devotion, the town used to butcher an animal in sacrifice to this god. And then every household would take a piece of the animal and hang it up outside their door as a way of saying like, we as a community have given this one sacrifice and here are all of the people who took part, you know, as a way of like showing off. And so when the werewolf comes around later on, it sort of does the dark mirror of that, where instead it'll kill an animal and then tear it to shreds and like fling those bits at the doors, you know, and like leave them on doorsteps and leave them around the town as a way of like saying like you are to fault for this. And it calls back to that previous ritual.
I like that. That's cool.
Yeah, and then later on when it's doing that to people, you're like opening the door and finding a finger outside your front door, or like a little bit of human flesh, you know, on your doorstep and things.
World's worst scavenger hunt.
Well, it's just like when a cat brings you a bird or something that it's killed, you know.
Oh yeah.
It's just trying to show you that it can hunt. Okay, so
and thinks you can't hunt for yourself apparently.
And I think I'm down for okay. So if this creature is like the avatar of a god, I kind of actually like the idea that it is. Unlike the previous legends we talk about, like in wolf form, this thing is like powerful and maybe unkillable. Maybe not like if you shoot it, it's not like the arrow or bullet bounces off, but that it just doesn't care because the god has no particular attachment to the body that it's using. So you shoot it and it causes a ton of damage and the god's just like, whatever. And it keeps walking, you know? And then when it turns you back into a human, then all of that damage starts affecting you. So it like leaves you as a corpse, but it's like, it doesn't stop you in the moment, but it will kill you in the morning. That sounds cool.
Yeah, that's kind of a cool idea where after this rampage, they go, looking for the beast.
Yeah.
And they find the deal maker with, the town hunter's trademark arrow sticking out of his back or something.
Yeah. And it also leaves you the possibility, like even without killing the werewolf, it gets its foot caught in a trap or something like that. And it wrenches its foot free, but it like injures itself. And then narratively, like down the line, as everybody's wondering, oh, who's the werewolf? Who's the werewolf? Who's the werewolf? And then like somebody sees, John the farmer or whatever, and he's got a cut on his hand where the werewolf had been damaged. And like, that's a good item of evidence, to use against them. I think that keeping that kind of synchronicity is good, but I love the idea that it's it's dangerous as a wolf, and it's big and it's very powerful, but even like you can't stop it the night of.
Yeah.
Unless, there's always the option of appeasing the god. Like that maybe there's like one person in the community who still understands what's going on and is like, hey guys, we just need to burn down the church and then sacrifice an animal and hang its bits outside our doors, and all this will go away. And like that pays the cost and we'll stop the rampage.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Where like there is a real option to just go back to the old ways. I like that.
Yeah, that's cool.
In fact, you could even split the community between the people who are willing to do that and willing to make that sacrifice, and they don't get attacked. But then the people who are adhering to the Christianity, the rejecting the old gods and like still going to church and like refuse to take part in the sacrifice, they continue to get attacked by it. And I love the idea of like the out of towner, the monster hunter who's like been sent by the church to like hunt down this werewolf, like an Inquisition style. Because I don't know if you know this, but like there were witch trials back in the day. There were werewolf trials as well.
Really?
Like there was same sort of Inquisition style. Everybody in the community going out and like killing people, torturing them to death to try to find the werewolf. It was that happened as well. Not that there were werewolves, but that people were killed for them.
I'm sure that's probably where a lot of the myths of like, well, the werewolf is vulnerable to X. So if we press a lump of burning silver to the man and he cries out, and he's clearly a werewolf.
Yeah, exactly. That's cool. Yeah, I like this whole conflict. This would be a great, this is almost an expansion out of the game Werewolf, right? Like you could actually frame this into like an RPG setting or something like that, where it's all about finding the person who's made the deal, and comparing people who've like had things go well for them lately and saying like, oh, well, like your crops are doing super great, John, are you a werewolf secretly at night? And you have like putting together the evidence to find it and stuff like that. That'd be kind of cool. Or like you could do an old school police procedural, but it's about finding the werewolf, bump, bump.
Like I can imagine at some point in the like if this were a story or whatever, like the man who wished for like improved crops, like to avoid suspicion, torches his own crops.
Oh yeah, just to throw it off.
Thus negating the purpose of his thing, because now he's just consumed with not becoming found.
Yeah, and then you can throw the wrench in the works where it turns out that the werewolf wished for prosperity for someone else. So that person becomes the target of the investigation, but they're not really the werewolf. And also the werewolf cares about them a whole heck of a lot, which is why they're willing to make the sacrifice. So they end up getting targeted and maybe killed or their house burned down or something like that by an angry mob. And so the werewolf then comes back next time and it targets those people this time, especially. That could be cool. And a lot of angles to take on that one.
Yeah.
So, are there any variants on this idea that we want to take out? Like, do we want to, would it be different if it was a different animal god? Like, is that an option? Like maybe...
the idea feels like it would probably be the same, but maybe...
like the specifics would be different?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, like, obviously varying from pagan god to pagan god.
Yeah, for sure. Or I mean, like if we're I've sort of had this idea in my head that this is a community where this happens kind of a lot, like over the centuries. If this is a community where it's the same god from time to time, but like it seems like once a generation or so, they have this sort of lycanthrope problem where somebody makes the same deal, but that the god might not always choose the same vengeance. Like obviously if it's angry enough, it will do the wolf monster that like kills people directly, but that it might choose a different sort of animal in order to have a different effect. Like a fox spirit might have a whole different sort of vengeance to enact. Like it may, like literally, like it's just the god trying something new. It's like, okay, the last few wolf guys didn't work. Let me try fox, and that one instead of rampaging and killing people, it acts more like a trickster, and it spends its time stealing things that are valuable and like breaking into the church and stealing the Bible, and leading people astray on paths and things like that. Where because it's not so large and imposing, it exacts a whole different kind of vengeance.
Okay,
that could be kind of cool.
Whereas sowing chaos instead of just straight up rampaging.
Yeah. And even if maybe it has a version where it doesn't turn him into anything at all, it just takes over your body and stays as you. And then, sows chaos and things like that. Or maybe it turns into another kind of, like it just turns into a shapeshifter human who can look like anyone else. And it goes and it pretends to be one person and sleeps with another man's wife and then creates discord in that marriage and stuff like that. Where instead of, causing a very direct kind of vengeance, it's like just breaking up the community.
Or maybe there's like a particular ancestry that he's just like that were involved in the destruction of his religion early on, like during the Crusades or something. And like he has sworn vengeance against that particular bloodline until it's stamped out.
Yeah.
He'll keep coming back in different forms through different agents.
Yeah, that's totally cool. Like the idea of the curse of the blood, except this time it's that you're targeted by the gods, until maybe your bloodline either is stamped out or one of its members pays a price, makes the same sort of sacrifice and pays homage to the god, and that mollifies him. That could be cool.
Yeah, maybe he doesn't even want to kill the bloodline. Maybe he just wants to torment them eternally. And so like he'll destroy like everything that bloodline holds dear through these different agents.
Yeah. Or like, I also love the idea that although this god hates this community right now for rejecting it, he also kind of loves it. Like it's his people, the ones that used to worship him back into time immemorial. So if outsiders come, he has the power to protect them as well. And so, I love the idea that the town gets invaded by an army and then all of these werewolves appear out of nowhere and start attacking the soldiers as a sort of
that is cool.
An outgrowth of this god's power because of how, built into this community he is.
I do think it's kind of interesting how in modern day, like werewolf is very specifically like that in-between state.
Yeah.
Like you almost never see them depicted as like they just become a whole wolf anymore.
I think it's because that has something to do with the fact that wolves aren't a big threat anymore. That we kind of as a modern audience, you almost kind of need the monster version of the werewolf in order to make it still a monster. Like
to impart that threat.
Yeah. Up until the 20th century, wolf attacks were like a real deal. Like you could still just go out into the woods and get attacked by wolves anywhere in Europe until quite recently. And so the idea of turning into a wolf was this kind of synonymous with being turned into a monster. And then now the version is, no, it has to be a real monster. People have a different sort of view of wolves now. And then also there's a much bigger modern idea of the real monster is man, like animals are just animals. And so you almost kind of have to give monsters man-like qualities in order to make them feel like real monsters to us as a modern viewer. And that may be, if we transpose this whole situation, this whole story that we've been talking about up into the modern realm, the god might have made that same sort of shift where he's going to make people into wolf monsters instead of wolves themselves, because you can see it doesn't have the same effect anymore, In fact, I kind of love the idea that if you have a modern version of this tale, it's one of those little towns that got enveloped by a big city. Like this little community used to be on its own and, out in the middle of nowhere. And then the urban sprawl of a big metropolis just enveloped it. And so now it's this little community inside of a giant urban area, and that the old forest that you have to go into to make the deal is just this little patch of park. It's just a little, it's just this little surrounded on all sides by row houses and factories and things like that. And that the god is just cordoned off to this one little area now.
That is kind of cool. Yeah.
But that you could still go back and make the same sort of deal, and he's still there to make the deal with. And that also could explain why the monster that you turn into has more man-like qualities now, is because back in the day there were still wolves around, and so it was sort of pulling from the world that this god has power over. He's like, okay, well, I'm going to make you like one of the creatures that live here, and now when I turn you into a quote unquote werewolf, I got a lot more were than I do wolf, and so I'm just going to make you more like you're still going to be a monster. You're still going to do the things I want you to do, but that's where all of these extra man-like qualities come from. It's because
it's been so long that he's forgotten what wolves look like.
Yeah. So in fact, you might even be more like a dog, because there's still people have pets. So you get maybe the floppy ears and the The coloring might be more like a Rottweiler or a...
And thus was the town terrorized by the Chihuahua.
Dude, of all of the dogs, the Chihuahua would probably be the one I'd be most scared of. Chihuahuas are freaking mean, man. Big dogs are so sweet. I've met so many big dogs and they're all just so nice, and like you could like wrestle with them and stuff, and they're totally cool. And like there's so many mean little dogs out there.
Well, they got to make up for being so small.
Yeah, they've got a little Napoleon complex. What's the joke where it's like big dogs, you can like push them over and they're like, oh boy, this is great. I love being pushed over. And you like try to like flip a little dog onto their back and they're like, death before dishonor. Well, I think we've got a pretty good coverage on werewolves. That's going to be it for us then.
Yeah, I think that covers things for us.
All right, bye.
See you later.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Monster Mechanics. So, you know how I've been saying for like a year that you could support us at patreon.com/monsterpod? Yeah, it turns out I just checked and you couldn't, because when I made that account, I hadn't hit some important button that actually said make this live. So that's just been a dead page this whole time. Anyway, that's been fixed, which means you really can support us at patreon.com/monsterpod, or you can just hit us up on Twitter at monstermpod, or email us at monstermechanicspodcast@gmail.com. We'd love to hear your feedback. Now for the credits. Monster Mechanics is produced and edited by me, Scott Paladin, and hosted by myself and my best friend, Zach Jaquays. All of the ideas generated during our podcast are released under a do what the you want public license.